Okay, Brian, I'm so happy to be chatting with you. We talked just a little bit before we started recording, but welcome. Can you tell me a little bit about you and your background in both film and just your career and what you're doing outside of film?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Brian Campbell. I am a professor of environmental science and studies and anthropology at Berry College up in North Georgia. I did my PhD in agricultural and cultural anthropology at the University of Georgia. I've taught at some other institutions. I've worked for the National Park Service, but I really got into making films because I've always been very into ethnographic films, anthropological films. I utilize them in teaching and such. But one time I was teaching at a university and we had a very strong master's in film program. And students came to me asking if I would collaborate with them on some film projects. And before I knew it, I was behind the camera. I was helping them edit. I was learning from some of our film professors at that university. And I was more of a producer, just setting things up and making sure things happened. Again, it was documentary and ethnographic film, so we were in field sites where I was doing research anyway. And the first film that I ended up producing was called Seed Swap, and it was about some of my research where I document family varieties of crops, heirloom crop varieties, and make sure they don't go extinct, make sure we document the stories behind those. And we ended up getting that on PBS, and a fire was kind of lit under me. I learned a little bit of the process. And whenever I'm conducting research, I think about how can I ensure that we save this for posterity, and I use cameras a decent amount and integrate students into the process. So yeah, I mean that's what I'm doing. I simultaneously do a lot of seed saving and farming and work with students in that area, but at the same time I keep an eye out for any stories that are worth being told, any stories that the mainstream media probably won't touch, stories that celebrate good things for humanity, things that we need to hear that the news might not cover. So that's what this film, Her Name Was Hester, that you guys are including in your film festival, that's what this does. For 5 years, I was slowly documenting this story of a farmer returning to her family farm. And I mean, I don't know if you want me to go into this film yet, or if you want me to give more backstory on my own.
Fine, you can go ahead and talk about Her Name Was Hester. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I'm working with students here at Berry College on farming, and then one of my neighbors told me that she was going to move back to her family farm. And now we live up in North Georgia, an hour north of Atlanta, an hour south of Chattanooga, out in the country. We are in the what we call the Ridge and Valley Province, so it's just south of the Appalachians. So it's the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains here. And so she's going to move back to her family farm, and I know that she lives in a very rural area, a backwoods kind of area, Chattooga County, Georgia. It's known for being very remote and rural. And I was intrigued at the idea of having students document her move back to that farm as a feminist piece. It was going to be more of what's this going to look like with her moving back into the good old boy realm where they're all kind of ranchers. It's more cow-calf operations. There's not a lot of row crops anymore. You can't make a living doing that. So there's a lot of animals up there, goats and cattle. So I was just kind of like, all right, what's this going to look like? And as the visual anthropologist, I wanted to document her farm because her father collects implements. And you see that in the film. When she first moved back, there were just all these old agricultural implements, old tractors. It's a museum of agricultural technology over the last century. So I got I teach a class called Seeing Subsistence, and it's kind of a visual anthropology class. And so we went out there and filmed and did photography, interviewed her father. And then it started to become obvious that this was a different story than I had envisioned. I did end up sending students out to interview her, but then I realized all her neighbors were Black. All the people around her were Black. And I didn't realize that when she told me she was moving back there. So I was intrigued, and we just kept covering this. And then it was like one thing after another. kept making me keep going with the story. I was like, all right, is the film over? Have we documented enough of this transition back to her farm? And then another interesting little thing would happen. And so I would just keep dragging students out there with me to run cameras and see what was going to happen.
When so it seems like the thing that really kicked off the story that you tell in the doc is her hearing from her grandpa that a slave woman named Hester had been a wet nurse for the family, and she's just floored by the whole thing. How far into the process did that happen?
Okay, so she knew that story had been passed down through their family for a long time. She heard that story. My Outlook is open. I'm turning it off. I apologize for that.
Mine's probably going to go off too.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure I turn this off so that it doesn't keep making noise. So that was a story she had originally heard when she was nursing her first child. And she said she was having trouble producing enough milk. And her grandfather told her, her pawpaw told her that story about how the women in their family have always had trouble, nursing their children. And so way back, they had a wet nurse named Hester that she, provided milk, supplemented the mother's milk in their family. And Hester was this integral part back then, and that they continue to pass that story down. And obviously in the film she said she didn't think that much about it, kind of weirded her out when she was nursing and they told her that story. But it wasn't until she returns back to the farm, and so her parents had her mother had passed, but the house she was moving back into was her grandparents' house, and so no one had lived in it for a while. And her mama, which is her grandmother that lived there, had died, I don't know, 5 years or so before that. So that house had sat empty, full of their stuff. So she moved back there, and she just was kind of haunted by stories. She was going through her mama's stuff, and her mama had actually put notes on things for her, knowing that she would end up going through and cleaning that place up. She's she's got a younger brother, but he's not really active with the farm and what's going on. So her mama knew she would be the one going through the things, and she takes that stuff quite seriously. It means a lot to her, all those memories. So anyway, and then it hit home. It hit her hard. So we were, it was a collaborative effort. I'd be out there filming, and I'd have students out there filming, but the fact that the cameras were rolling meant that it changed the way she responded, if you will, to those facts. And she decided, it wasn't like she wouldn't have done the right thing, but it was like the cameras were on her. Like, how is she going to react to the fact that she feels haunted by the fact that her family owned slaves on that farm that she's moving back to? And we're very good friends. We continue to collaborate on her nonprofit that has emerged from this project, because those families that we started interviewing, they're now family. I mean, they already were like family, but now they are family. And so they started a nonprofit to try to address inequities in Black access to education, Black access to agricultural grants and land and stuff like that. So it's really a beautiful community development that has emerged from this film project. It was us just running the cameras and documenting story, and then it just kept growing. So the music in it, is all original from musicians from the community. Our editor is a gentleman who's involved in stuff going on. And so it's definitely been a community effort, and the story is, homegrown and pretty impactful.
How has the community responded to seeing the film?
So we had our premiere. I got some grant money from the Georgia Humanities Council to finish the film. And with that, we were required to do a screening, an event, right? For the funding. That was part of it. You have to do an event. So we did a kind of a sneak preview before we got to the final cut.
Mm-hmm.
and brought some people from the Rome International Film Festival and people from the community. I did, well before that, I did a real rough cut screening with people from the community. And, they doubted my abilities at that stage because it was so rough, but they gave great feedback. They were excited. When we showed that sneak preview, when we were getting close, it needed, color correcting and some audio corrections and the final touches on the soundtrack and stuff, but they were ecstatic. I mean, they were kind of beside themselves. They were so excited at the idea we're going to be in this movie, and it's important to our community because they didn't know what to expect. Who am I? Just some random white guy that teaches at this college. They didn't think it was really going to be an actual, I don't know if they thought, oh, this is going to be a movie that's in a theater. So then we did Rome International Film Festival asked to have the premiere at the Rome International Film Festival, and it would be a community event, and I was like, yes, that is so exciting. So we had all these people from that community there on the red carpet taking pictures and all that, but we sold out the theater in downtown Rome, I mean, like in no time at all. And that has rarely happened on the opening night of Rome International Film Festival because it's a weeknight. It's a Thursday. It seats 500 and something, and it was completely standing room only. And it was just a lot of buzz and excitement around the community, and everyone loved the film. They were blown away at the film, and they loved the music. And then the Q&A afterward was a lot of fun. And in the film, Matthew Rayford, this guy is a character. He's a chef and a farmer, but he's in the Southeast. He's been on Garden and Gun he's been in Southern Living. He's been in all these famous magazines. He's a relatively famous chef. He's been on Beat Bobby Flay. He's been, on Food Network. So he was there, and then Kim Severson, the New York Times reporter, was there. So they were all at the Q&A, and the community was just ecstatic. It was really, I don't know, it made me feel fantastic that I was able to do that for those folks, and that they felt so proud of themselves and their community being well represented. Because it's putting a different spin on a story. I don't know. It's a tough story because it's still a white woman. We didn't intend for her to be the focus of a story about reparations. We just followed the story, and she is so genuine. Though she's not fake. She's not trying to be a white savior. The film would not have been made if she was at all disingenuous. So we're happy to put it out there. What we have had is a lot of white folks coming to us here in the South with very similar stories. And so our film presents, here's an opportunity for you to confront your family's legacy and repair that. So it's a new form of reparations. We had some Black leaders in our community come to us. They came to the sneak preview, and then one of these gentlemen, his name's Charles Love. He's a Black leader in our community. He works with at-risk youth. He's part of what we call the 100 Black Men of Rome, where they serve as role models and try to assist kids that are having a hard time in their community. He came to me. We've worked on projects before in the community gardens and stuff like that. And he said, this film changed my whole idea about reparations. He said it completely changed my thoughts about how we can repair relationships. And so he understood then that there can be individual reparations where you establish relationships with people in your community. And it's not just financial, because you can throw money at it, because that's what he said. He said the government might need to do reparations maybe, but that's not going to solve everything. Ultimately, it is relationships and repairing those relationships. But if you don't have any relationships in the first place, money's not going to repair it because you don't have the relationship. So it's caused a conversation in our community. And the evidence I've been shown is that it can have an impact in other communities. So our next steps are we're developing lesson plans and discussion guides, and we're going to put it on a local public television station. And we're hoping to start having it screenings, not in film festivals, but rather in public, settings, and have discussion guides distributed ahead of time and have people ready to come and talk.
We were at an event this past weekend, and we were talking to someone who worked at a library, and he plans screenings. And that's the first thing that I thought of when you talked about that is, not conventional place to watch it, but, libraries, other places that promote education. One of the things that I love about the movie is that it does say, okay, maybe the answer is not just donating the farm. Maybe the answer is not just selling the farm for money to give the money away. Maybe the answer is to talk about it. And I love that the documentary becomes the discussion. It shows the discussion, but it is the discussion. So the documentary is the answer for trying to make restitution. So I thought that was pretty great.
Yeah, you tapped into something there because it was the process of me involving students. So that's what the film is it's me involving my classes, my coursework, my curriculum in this process of reconciliation collaboratively with the community. So that's what the film is me involving students in all these discussions and letting them see how it played out with cameras rolling. And then the editing was quite tricky, to be honest. Hats off to my editor. He is fantastic. He's down in Atlanta and he's working in the film industry. And I pitched it to a little production company here in Rome, and the guy, it's Brand Red Studios here, and he said, I've got the editor for you. I think he'll like it, because it was basically volunteer work for him. He loved the idea behind the story. And he came aboard before we learned the genealogical connections.
Yeah, before the ending.
He was on board. We had all this footage, and I had written a really long script that was way too long. And so he came aboard, and then we had another discovery that was so impactful. So we had to change, the structure of our script quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm working on a feature doc right now, and I've had to rewrite the script over and over and over again, as we're shooting, as I figure out what I think the story is. And it's really interesting watching how aware, like, the subject of the doc is, because he'll stop, he'll be like, okay, you want to shoot this, you want to whatever, but also, like, he's so aware because he's also had to do so much marketing of what he does. He's a muralist. And he's had to be very aware of the storytelling through video, because it's such an integral part of how you communicate in the world today.
Yeah.
So it's interesting hearing someone who understands story be told his story.
Yeah.
But that's one of the projects we're working on right now. We're working on a number of documentaries. So I think it's really cool to hear your process and what you're doing, and then relate to what we're doing as well.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So you said the future of the project is use it as education, creating lesson plans and make this really actionable. Do you have any other documentary projects that you're working on currently?
Yeah, I've got a few things in the works. These film projects, they take forever. So this one took like 5 years, and I am taking a little bit of a break. I actually have a sabbatical coming up and in the fall, so I will be focusing on actually writing some of the data from 2 of my previous films into academic articles that need to get published, because some of the data didn't make it into the film. But I have another film project that is set down in Belize. I've run trips through Belize, and I ended up collaborating with this character. I mean, he's the wildest, funniest, most intelligent gentleman with a story that goes on, and it would take me a while to tell the whole story, but long story short, a former film I did about him was him trying to stop a dam in Belize because it was going to flood scarlet macaw and tapir habitat. And his approach was to try to say that he was worried about the economics, which was really a good argument. But he knew that the environmental argument wouldn't win because the people in Belize have not been allowed access to a lot of that habitat because of fortress conservation, because outside conservation groups want to fence off areas that they think are sensitive. So they want to fence them off so local people can't go in there. So that film was called Dam to Dam, and it was a short that I did. But the bigger story that we're going to now pursue that I've never felt I could do justice is about his childhood and how his parents took him all through Central and South America as a kid. And then his father got arrested flying weed into the United States and escaped prison and was on the run forever. And when I first met this guy, he wanted me to make a movie about his dad so his dad wouldn't have to return to prison. Yeah. And I said, I can't do a movie about that. But we just started filming. I kept going back with students down there, and I've hung out with him. He's a good friend of mine. But his story is incredible. I've interviewed his dad when he was on house arrest after he finally did get out of prison. I've interviewed him multiple times. I have their family slide collection from Central and South America from the 70s and 80s is amazing. I mean, they were hanging out with native people in Colombia, the Maroons. They were there, there's pictures of them naked, just hanging out with indigenous people, fishing, and pictures of them all the way down in the Tierra del Fuego in the snow. They are amazing people. And I've met all the members of the family. And remember the film Rashomon? Kurosawa film, the Rashomon effect, how everyone has a different view of the world and they will all remember things differently because of their particular way of seeing the world based on experience. All of them, the mom, the dad, my buddy, and his brother, all remember everything about all that stuff differently. Yeah. So they all have these different recollections and perceptions of what happened and why. And it is a hell of a story. So my editor that I worked with on this film wants to tackle it for real. I've been sitting on tons of footage, but I never could do it justice. So I'm hoping that we can bring that to fruition. So that's our next project.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that sounds like an interesting project. And I love the potential of showing the same story multiple times and everyone disagreeing. That could be done really interesting in a lot of different ways. As you work at the university, you were talking about stopping to write up so you can publish, I assume as part of tenure. Do they treat documentary projects? Can they count that towards your work, or are they just not?
Yeah, no, they can. So, every institution's different. I have tenure. I'm the chair of our environmental science and studies department. It's more kind of I see it as an obligation to society that I get some of this stuff that I've collected out there. And I know that some of it's not going to end up in a film. And I have what I find are unique insights from people that I've interviewed and hung out with. One of my previous films is called To Kingdom Come, and it's about PCB contamination in our city here in Rome. And I collected so much stuff. And the film itself is like, it's not the most beautiful film. Students did a lot of the camera work, but it's dense. It's an educational film it's like a publication, academic publication with way too many, tidbits and factoids and important concepts and stuff. So I use it in the classroom. It's really a good tool in the classroom for teaching lots of concepts and showing concerns with, cognitive dissonance and greenwashing and all this different stuff. But so that data needs to get out there. And then to go back to your question about tenure, yes, you can make the argument, that documentary film can be peer reviewed. Here's the part of the problem. This is the beauty of your film festival. I can submit my film to film festivals and I'm up against films with $1 million budget. And if I get rejected or I don't get accepted or selected into those film festivals, so if I go back to my administration, I didn't get into any film festivals. Well, your film must not be any good. So that's peer review. So the beauty of your film festival is at least we know apples to apples, my film got into a micro budget film festival. My budget was $7,000. That's how much money I spent on this film, $7,000. So you need to be able to demonstrate my film is good enough that it passes peer review, right? Obviously, I show my films in academic conferences. And so then that's a form of peer review. It gets accepted. The film Dam to Dam I actually showed in Cuba at a Canadian anthropology meeting. This was still when, this was right when Trump came in. They cut off relations between, we no longer could
Right
go to
after
Cuba
Obama opened it
for
up.
vacation. Well, Obama opened it, and I submitted this going, I'm going to go down to Cuba. Actually, there's a scene in my film that I was telling you about where my buddy's dad that escaped from prison sails, he's trying to sail to Belize and he gets washed into Cuba. So I actually was trying to go to Cuba just to run a camera and get some footage of Cuba for the movie. And then the borders closed again, and all the Canadians got to go to the beaches and go party, and I had to stay at the conference because it was only work related stuff. Anyway, so that was a form of peer review. So then I was able to say, look, my film got into this, because a lot of academic conferences might have a film section. So then I can get a form of peer review. But I have a formal document from the American Anthropological Association and Visual Anthropology that explains how you can evaluate film in anthropology for tenure decisions and for how it should count. And in my field, I'm anthropology, but I'm also environmental studies. Environmental studies includes art and humanities. So in theory, again, from one university to the next, they're going to have different ways to evaluate. But in theory, one of my films should count on par with a good academic publication. You and I know how much work a film is, a feature documentary, and I do all the music. I do all the, I work with an editor, but I oversee all the writing and the research and the filming. I bring students on, train them how to run cameras. You know the deal. It's so much work. So I don't think that universities, give filmmakers their due when it comes to tenure, especially if it's not in a communication department or something like that. But you can make the argument. You have to make the argument in your tenure portfolio.
That's interesting.
I've been through it. I've gotten tenure at 2 universities, and most of it was my publications, but film I included in there also.
Yeah, so I teach at a community college here, and our process is very different because they're not really seeking publications.
Right.
It's not really what they're trying to do, but if it helps you, I'll have a doctorate, and so you write that up.
Cool. Right. No, I hit you up for a letter because I'm going to go up for full next year.
Whatever helps.
Yeah. Well, you are evaluating. Your film festival selected my film. Yeah. So that demonstrates that it's worthwhile.
Yep. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really really fun to hear. I'm excited to hear that you've got a lot of things coming down in the future. I think this is a fantastic project. I'm really happy to show. As I've been talking about the festival, I keep telling people, it's like, this is a cool one, and I want people to experience how thought provoking it can be, like it was for me. So I think I've used enough of your time, but if you want to say
one thing. At the very end of the film, after the credits, there's an epilogue. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
And it's very non-traditional to throw that after it, but we wanted to show well after the film was completed that the thing is continuing. They went out to the gravesite, and that was a very powerful moment. Yeah. So it's hard to get the audience to sit there after the credits, but it's kind of worth the payoff. So.
Yeah, I did watch that. It's, I think you finish it and you're like, there's all this extra, so okay, yeah, there's more going on there.
Yeah, we didn't know what to do with that. We weren't sure, but we knew it needed to be shown so that people can see that this story is not over. It's still going. And anyway, hey, thank you so much. I am about to run my daughter to soccer practice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.